downtown Dallas attending a court trial. We had just been let out for recess because the judge was going to leave. We were let out 11 o'clock because the judge was going up to the Apparel Mart because he was going to have luncheon with the president, who is going to be in town. So that's why we let out early. So we went down and we went into this little restaurant to have something to eat, and they announced the president was coming down the street in the cavalcade of all of his people. So we went out and watched him come by, and as we turned and walked in to go in the door back into the restaurant, we heard shots. And upon hearing the shots, we ran back out again, and as we went to the corner, was that Hudson Street, did you say? Or what is that street? Yes, we went down the street where he made his turn. Across the street, there was a red-haired lady standing there by herself. She had a rust-colored dress on. She was a more mature lady, and she acted kind of dazed. And I went over to her and asked her if she knew what had happened, and she said, yes, the president has been shot. And my husband and I went from there right over to Delzy, and we started looking down across there, and we saw a few people in the ground. We saw a policeman going up over the grassy knoll by the picket fence. And we took down into that area too, just curiosity, I guess. And when we got down there near this cover, we were standing there yet, and I looked down.
Manhole cover?
Manhole cover, and I saw this piece of dirt raised up like a ground mole would, but it didn't go down. It went across the ground, under it. And I bent over, and I traced it for several foot back, and a policeman appeared and traced it with me, and I said, what in the world is this? It's like a ground mole hole, but I've never seen one so long. And he says, that's where a bullet went through. And it traveled quite a ways back, but it did not come out of the ground. I said, well, it didn't come out, and he said, no, it's still in there. And as we turned around to go back to the curb to see where it had come from, there was a nick there in the curb, and just then all the motorcycles came at one time from underneath 183.
And then later on is when you tried to let the FBI know of what you saw.
That wasn't until July when they were trying to pick up evidence. And we thought maybe ours might be a little bit of help.
Did they try, were they very interested in what you had to say?
No, it was just kind of matter of fact. We don't care whether you can.
And after you gave your statement, what did they try to tell you as an explanation for what you saw?
That it was pieces of bone from the skull of the president. And I told him I did not believe that a bone could do all of that.
You did not tell them that it came from the depository. We told them it came from the grassy knoll.
That it
couldn't have come from the depository.
The angle it was, it couldn't have been from the president's skull.
Well, I think that sounds very logical.
I don't know if I'm missing anything. I know you can cut that off when you pieces you don't want, so I'm trying to think what...
Well, Mrs. Hartman, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're here with Mr. J.W. Foster, former Dallas policeman, retired from the Dallas Police Force, was on the Triple Overpass on November 22nd, 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated. Okay, and according to your Warren Commission testimony, you saw where a shot had hit the turf on the south side of Elm Street?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you said that the shot had caught the manhole cover at the corner?
The concrete of the manhole cover, yes.
Okay. Concerning the man that was with Buddy Walters in the picture, did you see his credentials or hear Mr. Walters call him by any name? Or
no, sir, I didn't.
Do you know about how long he remained in that area?
Oh, good hour, I imagine.
Okay. At the time, were you curious as to exactly who he was, or were you more satisfied with the fact that he was with Buddy Walters and that he probably was a detective or investigator or something of that nature?
No, I wasn't curious about him because he came up with, while Buddy came up with Buddy did, and I knew Buddy Walters and I didn't question the other man at all.
Okay. And did you see him pick up a bullet or and put it in his pocket?
No,
anything
sir.
Of that nature?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Foster. I appreciate it.
All right.
Okay, we're here at the JFK Assassination Center with former Deputy Sheriff Maddox.
I was director of fiscal affairs and executive assistant to Bill Elector.
Okay. And also we're here with the director, Mr. Larry Howard, and Mr. Malcolm Summers, who himself was an eyewitness on the south side of Elm Street during the Kennedy assassination, and also Mr. Stan Surzan, a JFK Assassination Center researcher from Connecticut. And we're here because the kindness of Mr. Maddox is going to loan and donate some of his material, first-hand material, to the Assassination Center. And we also have a chain. We have an original chain that was used on Mr. Jack Ruby that Mr. Sturzan has.
Why you showing that? How would that have been placed on his leg or ankle? Or?
This was on his ankle to make it comfortable.
Okay.
And this one around the bed frame.
Oh, okay. So it's actually chained to the
He had
bed?
plenty of room.
Okay.
And this is where the documentation was when the chain was stolen and the car was stolen. The documentation was right on
It's
here.
right on the tag.
This was pitched in a corner a few days after he died, and it laid there till it got rusty, and I picked it up and documented it, that it was chained. Why, I don't know, I just did.
That's nice.
And you're also donating the original mugshot from Jack Ruby.
This is on loan for as long as he wants.
Wow.
And that's what this is. This is the original. I also have pictures that were drawn by Jack Ruby, little doodles, you might call it. It's not really a picture, it's just a drawing. And he did sign this on the back, and it reads, "Best always to a real guy, Jack Ruby." He also drew another one, and I never did get a chance to get him to sign this one. He drew two of these. It took him quite a while to draw these things, and he used, as a straight edge, he wasn't allowed a ruler. He used something like a piece of real stiff cardboard or something to make the straight line.
I think I could do that with a T-square.
Yeah. And this is the letter that he had folded and handed to me one day as I left his bedside, and he wrote me a letter.
Why don't you show Mr. Howard how he
Okay. You close that. When I shook hands with Jack Ruby, he was sweaty. He was wet, and I shook hands with him. I felt this piece of paper in his hand. And when I left, I just took the paper with me because I didn't want anybody to realize that I had taken a note out of the jail. And this part is faded. The part that was next to his hand, from sweating, his hand was real wet. As you unfold this now, after 29 years, you can see the part that's faded from the sweat on his hand. And it's still readable, and he mentions two guys, a Lynn Burke and Johnny Crank, who were state liquor control agents at the same time I was. And they too knew Jack Ruby. They knew him a lot better than I did, and they drink his whiskey. This is some doodles that Jack Ruby drew, and this is possibly off of the card that he used. This notepad here was off of a small notepad, and the stiff part, the pasteboard part on the back, I believe is possibly what he used to draw these lines with. Now, someone brought I've given out 2 or 3 copies of this from a copying machine, and Larry tells me that someone brought this copy up here and asked him if he thought this was Jack Ruby's handwriting. Well, I'll promise you, you proved to me that it isn't, and then you've got yourself everything I own. Not much, but it'll carry your teeth.
As a matter of fact, when they came up, I went and got some Jack Ruby's letters, and I have contracts to its reference he signed. And it's no question about it. It's just,
Okay.
why don't you read back on the back what he said about Oswald?
Okay, let's see what he said here. He says, you've known me a long time. You've known the way I've struggled to make my clubs go. Also, Lynn, that's what Lynn Burke, who's now retired and living in Tyler, has known me up to the time that I've gotten into trouble. He knew he was in trouble, at least he was that smart. Says, as a matter of fact, he and Johnny Crank, who's ex-liquor control agent, Johnny Crank's a car dealer in Austin, Texas now, and myself have been out to dinner many times. I am sure they know the kind of person that I am. Says, well, he says, this all adds up to what I'm going to tell you. That I'm being framed for the assassination, that my motive was to silence Oswald. I know you will think I'm crazy, but keep this note for a later date, and it is. It's 29 years later. And you will then know what I'm saying here. Keep your eyes open, and maybe you'll notice some things. I've noticed a bunch of things. I don't know what the hell they are.
It's very amazing.
It's very valuable. At this point in time, I believe that's about it.
All right. We are also here with Mr. Robert Johnson of the Assassination Center, that is the Director of Archives here, and appreciate you being here too. And Mr. Maddox, could you look at these photos? Bill Newman here.
Mark, I remember on November 22nd, 1963, that Gayle and I had gone out to Love Field to see President Kennedy come in, and we did not get a very good look at him. We knew the parade route, so we drove downtown and parked in behind the building across Houston Street from the school book depository. And we walked down in behind the crowd at Houston Street and Elm, and walked in the direction of the triple underpass. And when the people played out against the curb, we just stood on the curb waiting on the president's car to come by. We were about half the distance between the triple underpass and Houston Street. And I remember hearing the crowd first, and then seeing the president's car as it turned off of Main Street onto Houston, and then it went the short block and turned left onto Elm Street. I can remember seeing the president's car coming towards us, and when the president was probably 150 feet or so from us, the first 2 shots rang out. I can remember a boom, boom, about like that. And at that time, I remember seeing the president's hands come up, and it looked like he was trying to protect his face.
Did the road sign block your view at all?
I don't recall the road sign,
Okay.
because I was kind of looking up the street. I was right
Okay.
on the curb and looking up towards the car as it was coming towards me. And when those first 2 shots rang out, I thought someone had thrown a couple of firecrackers near the president's car, and I thought, boy, that's in poor taste.
A lot of people said that.
that's in very poor taste. But as the car got closer, I could tell that something was definitely wrong. I remember President Kennedy looking into the crowd and moving his head kind of with an unusual look on his face. And I remember seeing Governor Connolly, and his eyes were protruding, and he was kind of laid back, holding himself, and I could see the blood on his shirt. And I knew something was wrong.
Was at that point, would you say it was after the second shot that you saw Governor Connolly?
Oh yes, it was sometime after the second shot. The first two shots were fired very close together.
Within 2 or 3 seconds, you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
And then there was a time delay there until the car reached us and traveled probably that distance of some 150 feet. And as the car got directly in front of us, and the president was not much further than I am from you now, probably 10 or 12 feet. He was directly in front of me. The third shot rang out, and I remember seeing the side of his head come off. And I could see a white, and then all of a sudden red. And I turned to Gayle and I said, "That's it, hit the ground." And at that moment, my fear was that the shot had come from directly behind us on a higher elevation, and that we were in the direct line of fire.
Because of the reaction to the president, or the spot that it had hit him?
Yes, sir. The spot that it hit him, I was looking straight at him, and I remember seeing him go across the car into Mrs. Kennedy's lap.
Did it appear in the right temple area?
It appeared, yes, right in this area,
Yeah.
near the side of his head.
Police station and sign an affidavit?
Yes. Afterwards, just a few minutes after the assassination, Gayle and I stood up, and a couple of gentlemen ran up to us. One of them was a local TV personality by the name of Jerry Haynes. And he asked us what we saw, and we said we saw the president was shot. And it just happened right before our eyes. And he said, "Would you come with us to WFAA, to the TV station?" We said we would. He stopped the car, and the man drove us over there. And we were interviewed on the air. And then after that, we were carried by a couple of police officers. I assume they were with the county sheriff's department, because they carried us to Sheriff Bill Decker's office. And at that time, Gayle and I gave an affidavit, and Gayle and myself are 2 of 16 people that day that gave original affidavits as to what they saw.
Did anybody try to doubt you, or say they didn't think that's what happened, as to what you saw or where you thought the shots might have came from? Did anybody try to twist your story or discredit it or anything like that?
No one tried to discredit our story. We were simply asked what we saw, and the court reporter or the stenographer, whoever, took the information down, and it was not a exchange of questions and answers. It was simply a recording of what we saw.
Now that, after seeing any evidence or documentation, facts, that is, what is your opinion now of the charge that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone? What do you think of that?
Well, I question that. It's hard for me to believe that it was the act of one lone individual. And there's many theories. There's many directions that you could go in with the Kennedy assassination, who and why President Kennedy was assassinated. But the one thing that is very hard for me to accept is the lone assassination theory. I have to believe that there's more to it than that, and that there was more people involved. Myself, I have no evidence other than what I visually saw that day, that just would lead me to believe that it was not the act of one individual.
You were only, what would you say, about 10 feet away from President Kennedy when
10 or 12 feet. We were standing on the curb, and to the best of my knowledge, we were the width of one lane of traffic. the president's car was out from the curb. It was not in the curb lane, but it was out some distance from that lane. I would say about the distance of one lane.
Right.
Just before, it was just a few feet away, just before the
And
third shot.
you weren't called before the Warrant Commission at all?
No, sir, I was not. We were interviewed twice by the FBI. They came to our home.
And it was just they took down what you said and left, and that was the end of
Yes,
that?
there was no leading of the witness, so to speak, or anything like that. It was just more of a discussion like you and I are having here. Of course,
Newman, I appreciate your time.
you're quite welcome, Mark.
She has been neglected, but today this is her life story. And for now, we're just going to start with when she came down to Dealey Plaza to see President Kennedy. And
Bill and I had gone out to the airport earlier with the children, and Clayton and I were not able to get over to the fence close enough to see the President and Mrs. Kennedy. And so we left and went down to Dealey Plaza and parked and walked along the curb until we reached a point where there was no people standing next to the curb, and stopped there. We hadn't been there but probably 5, maybe 10 minutes when the President's motorcade came by or approached. We looked up the street, and I was pointing to the children that the President was coming when we heard 2 quick noises that sounded like firecrackers. And it went through my mind that it was in very bad taste for someone to throw firecrackers, close to the President's car. And he seemed to be reacting, shielding his face. And I thought, well, he's got a real good sense of humor. And they approached closer. And when they got directly in front of us, a third shot was fired, and it hit him in the side of the head, and just bits of flesh and stuff flew up in the air. And Bill turned to me and he said, "That's it." And we turned around, put the children on the ground, and shielded them with our bodies. And I remember hearing Mrs. Kennedy scream, "Oh my God, no, they've shot Jack." Then the limousine sped off. We stayed there for a few minutes, which seemed like forever. We got up, and there was crowds running up behind us to the concrete wall there at the grassy knoll, and we got up and started up in that direction when we were approached by 2 TV people, and they asked us if we would go to Channel 8, and we went over to Channel 8. And
saw President Kennedy shot in the head. Did you clearly see his reaction to that, or was your view obstructed or anything? Or
no, our view wasn't obstructed at all. Like I said, when he was shot, he sort of went backwards and then across the seat. When he was shot, just bits of stuff flew up, and blood started, coming out of his head, and then he fell over into Mrs. Kennedy's lap.
you were probably not more than just 10 or so feet?
We were 1 car width away from the car, and he was directly in front of us when the third shot was fired.
Well, Mrs. Newman, I thank you very much for your time.
More than welcome.
Okay, we are here with Beverly Oliver, who was an eyewitness to the assassination of President John F. Kennedy on November 22nd, 1963. And Beverly, where were you positioned at that fateful moment?
Almost directly across the street from the infamous Zapruder.
And you yourself were taking
Movie film.
movie film? And what type of camera did you have at that time?
The brand, I'm not sure. It was a foreign made. It was either like a Yashica or a Fujiyami, which I had both of those. So I don't remember exactly. It was an experimental camera that had been given to me by Lawrence Taylor Ronco Jr., a man that I was dating at the time. and it was an 8mm camera.
And you were wearing a raincoat, is that right?
An all-weather coat, a green and
Because
white
it-
polka dotted silk dress under it, flat shoes, a headscarf, and a black wig.
Did you wear the coat because it was raining earlier that
Uh-huh,
day?
yeah.
Okay. And you also had on a dark wig, you said?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And at what time did you turn on your camera? At what point?
Well, I had taken pictures prior to the motorcade coming because it was the first time I had used the camera. And I took pictures like up and down the street and the people around and that kind of thing. And so then as the motorcade, as the policemen on the motorcycles turned the corner, I started filming again.
Had anyone tried to tell you not to stand in that area?
No,
There's no
I
problem
just
at all?
walked right over there. But of course, you have to understand, I was an entertainer downtown at the Colony Club. I was a singer there. So all the policemen in Dallas knew me, and they were used to seeing me with red wigs and black wigs and brown wigs, and you know. So they knew who I was.
At what point, do you remember, did you first hear the first shots? Was there any definition to that, or?
Well, now, a lot of people have asked me that, Mark, and I'm not really certain when I heard the first shot. I know that there were sounds prior to me realizing that there had been a shot fired that killed a president. But in my mind, I thought about it being those little things that they used to make when I was a child. You're probably too young to remember them. But they used to make a little thing about the size of a piece of round bubble gum. And you threw it on the sidewalk and it exploded and made a pop. And that's, you know, I remember thinking, gosh, you know, somebody's really weird to let somebody bring those down here in this crowd. And that's all I thought. I mean, I can't remember thinking anything that it was a shot. I didn't. The only time that I realized that a shot had been fired was when I was looking through the viewfinder of my camera at the time the president was fatally wounded, when he went violently back against the seat and the back of his head blew off.
And you clearly saw that?
Well, I clearly saw that, which put me in a total state of shock. I was frozen. Everybody says, why didn't you fall down like everybody else? I couldn't have if my life depended on it. I was like a statue. I was totally frozen.
Did you see the man run from the car immediately behind the presidential limousine and run and jump on that?
Yes, I was still filming.
Okay.
I was still filming. I continued to film until they got probably just to the underpass. If I were guessing, I probably stopped filming just as they got to the underpass, if I were guessing. But I can't prove that because my film is gone.
And what did you do after that?
I walked across the street to the direction in which I felt like the shot had come from. And there was a whole group of people. People were running over there and gathering over there, and not being one to immediately go up to a crowd of people, I stood around the area of the concrete steps that comes down the grassy knoll. And I stood there and was watching the crowd of people on the other side that had gathered and just kind of listening. And really, I think I was waiting to see if anybody wanted to talk to me. And they didn't.
No police officers approached you?
No policeman approached me. I saw a policeman right after I got to the other side of the street come down from like the concrete area up there that I guess is a monument. I to this day don't know what it was. Of course, back then it wasn't called Dealey Plaza. It was just called, I just called it the grassy place down there by the highway. And somebody came from the concrete area, and it was a policeman, and he went off in the direction that I call north. Now, I'm not sure about the directions, but he went toward the downtown area, that direction. And as I stood there, a man came down like this and caught the peripheral vision on my left-hand side, and I looked up, and I saw a policeman that I knew. I did not know his name at the time, but I knew him to be Geneva White's husband, who was the hostess for Jack Ruby.
And but you knew Geneva White?
Yes, I knew Geneva.
Okay. And then you held on to your film until you brought it to work with you, is that correct?
Well, my film was remained in the camera. Didn't even take it out of the camera. I was in an absolute state of shock. I walked back to the parking garage down by the Colony Club. I got in my automobile and I started driving home, and I was on Central Expressway when the news came on that the president was dead, and I remember pulling over to the side of the street and sobbing. I went home, I took 2 sleeping pills, and I went to sleep. About, I'm going to say 4:30, somewhere along in there, Abe Weinstein, my boss, called and told me that we would be closing the club that night in honor of, the president being shot in memory and mourning. And when I got up, of course I turned on the news and saw everything that the news had to say. And my mom wanted to come down to the site, and I drove my mom down here that afternoon where all the flowers were. We went down to see the flowers. I took stills of the flowers, which are here in the center. And I went back home. I took 2 more sleeping pills and went back to bed. The next day I virtually kept myself knocked out. I was afraid, but I don't know of what. I still don't know of what. It was just a horrible trauma to have gone through. And while I was not the closest witness to the assassination, I had it in a viewfinder on a camera, which was just like it happened in my face. Something that I will never forget, something that gives me nightmares still.
You held on to it at that point and decided not to?
Well, I didn't decide. I cannot say that was a conscious decision. I just didn't do anything. Just like today, my husband and I went to Texas Photo over in Texas, and I took some film over there that I found in a drawer that I have no earthly idea what's on them. I took some last week and had them developed, and they were when my 10-and-a-half-year-old daughter was 6 months old. And that's how long they have been undeveloped in my drawer. I mean, this is a habit that I have. This is when the club reopened. Our first show, I think, was at 9. Anyway, I went to work about 7:45 till 8 to 8 o'clock. That's when I normally arrived at work. And our club had 2 sets of stairs. You went up a set of stairs, you hit a landing, you went up the second set of stairs, and there was the little desk where you paid your cover charge and went in. Well, when I got to the landing between the 2 flights of stairs, there were 2 men waiting there. One man, they both flashed ID, but only one do I remember being a badge. The man had a badge. He told me his name, and he said he was with the FBI. He said, we understand that you were down. Now, of course, I'm paraphrasing the conversation because I don't remember it word for word, but it was, the content is the same. He said, I understand you were down at the grassy area taking pictures when the president was killed. And I said, yes, sir, I was. He said, have you had the film developed? I said, no, sir, I have not. And he said, where are they? I said, they're still in my camera. He said, where's your camera? I said, it's in my makeup kit. Now, also in my makeup kit, beside the camera, was a Prince Albert tobacco can full of marijuana. Just a few years before, Candy Bar had been sentenced to, I think it was 10 or 15 years in the penitentiary for less than an ounce of marijuana. And there I am with a Prince Albert can full of marijuana. If they'd asked me for my soul, I would have asked them how to get it out, and I'd be glad to give it to them. So I opened up my makeup kit with the back of it, the lid of it, opening up to him, hoping he couldn't see in it. I handed him my makeup tray and asked him to hold it so that I could distract him. Well, I jerked that camera out, took the makeup tray back, set it back down in there, and handed him the camera, at which point he took the film out of my camera. And he said, we want to develop them and look at them, and we'll get them back to you in a few days. And I said, fine. And being 17 years old at the time, I was too dumb to ask for a receipt. Didn't know I needed one. This was the FBI. Now, a few days before, I had met Oswald in Ruby's club and had been introduced to him as Lee Oswald, my friend with the CIA. I didn't know what the CIA was, but I did know what the FBI was. And I did not want them looking in my makeup kit. And I trusted them. Why shouldn't I?
But you had worked for Jack Ruby?
No, I worked for Abe Weinstein next door and was very close friends with Jack Ruby and a couple of the girls in his club, Jada and Shari Angel.
Did you ever identify anyone or both of the 2 men that came to take your film from you that day?
In 1969, I think it was, or no, it was in 70. It would have been the fall of 70, I think. There was an investigator, could have been 71. I'm not sure, but he knows exactly when it was. There was an investigator by the name of Gary Shaw, whom I talked to the first time in the fall of 69 or the spring of 70, when I was staying in his home under very different circumstances.
And he came to interview me in a little town called Omaha, Texas. He brought 4 mug books. He and another man came down and brought 4 mug books. He asked me to go through these mug books and pick out people. Asked me if I knew this person and that person. He came to the picture of David Ferry in that, and he said, "Who is this?" I said, that's David Ferry. He was Jack Ruby's manager of his club. The man was in the club so much that I, honest to God, thought he was the manager of the club. And I didn't know till just last year that he wasn't. And so while I was going through, it was in the 4th or the 3rd book that I ran. I'd already given Gary a description of the man, Mr. Shaw. I'd given him a description of the man, and I found him in the book, and I said, "This is the guy who took my film." He said, "You think that's the man who took your film?" I said, "No, sir, I know that's the man who took my film." And lo and behold, the man was FBI agent Regis Kennedy.
Regis T. Kennedy.
I don't know, just Regis Kennedy's all I know. And of course, he didn't have his name underneath there. There wasn't anything on the mugs to say, this is an FBI agent, this is a policeman, this is a mobster, this is, you know, it was just a regular mug book.
The time to remember that you had seen.
Oh no, I knew immediately when it happened that this is the man that Jack had 2 weeks to 3 weeks before introduced to me as his friend. So then it put me in total confusion to try to figure out why my friend Jack would go into the basement of the police station and shoot the man who he said was his friend. Now, I knew before, you know, when seeing pictures of Oswald as being the accused assassin, that this was the man that I had met in the club before, but I didn't put any connection to Ruby being involved in it in any way, you know, until he went down in the basement and killed Oswald.
In your opinion, would you say that Jack Ruby was strictly just a nightclub operator, or was he more involved in money laundering or drugs or prostitution or gun running has been the accusation through the years?
Do we have a section that says all of the above?
Yeah. And were you aware that he knew quite a number of Dallas policemen?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but see, people also make a big deal of that, okay, that he knew all the Dallas policemen, which he did. I'm going to say probably, if I had to guess and give you a guesstimation, I would say he probably knew at least 85% of the Dallas police force by first name.
So when the chief of the Dallas police came on TV and said that possibly 40 or 50 Dallas police officers knew Jack Ruby, that probably wasn't a fair assumption.
Not unless we had an awful small police force back then.
Okay.
But then to be fair, I also have to say those same policemen that went into Jack Ruby's club also came to the Colony Club, you know, and all of the clubs, Barney Weinstein, Abe Weinstein, they all gave free coffee to the policemen. It was good. It cut down on needing security. I mean, there were policemen in the clubs at all times.
Turn back to you. Are there any efforts underway to...
I am in the process of contacting attorneys now to file a class action suit to regain the custody of my film. It is mine. I want it back. They've had it long enough. I think they should have seen it by now at least once, and I think they ought to return it to me. I really do. It's mine, and I want it back.
Ask you to describe it. Is there any doubt in your mind that the president had a rear head wound? Could you say?
In my opinion, which is what you're asking
Yes,
for,
that's-
the whole back of his head blew off.
Okay.
It looked like there was a whole bucket of blood thrown out the back of his head. And I don't care if I'm the only person on the face of the earth that believes it. I know without a shadow of a doubt he was shot from the front and the back of his head blew off. Now, if he was shot in the back of the head from the school book depository, then that bullet had to do a U-turn in his head and come back out. And I just don't think bullets do that.
time after the assassination that someone might have advised you that it would be better not to speak openly about what you saw?
Oh, my husband. Not the husband I'm married to now. I'm married to a preacher now. Thank God God turned my life around, and married to a preacher now. But my first husband was the alleged leader, or one of the alleged leaders of the Dixie Mafia. He was a hitman. At the time of his death, he was counted with 16 murders here in the state of Texas. So he was no small-time hood. At the time of his death, he was under a 20-year prison sentence. And one night after a cozy little meeting at the Egyptian restaurant, or Egyptian lounge, an Italian restaurant here in Dallas, with a bunch of people, such as Hargis Jr., Charles Harrelson, Russell Douglas Matthews, Joe and Sam Campisi, my husband, Timmy Overton, and Jerry James, I know for sure were at that meeting. And the subject, and I don't know how, okay, so I can't put it all together for you, but the subject came up, and I said I was there when it happened, you know, and I started telling them what I saw.
You knew these gentlemen?
Yeah, they were friends of my husband. As a matter of fact, Artie Matthews, Russell Douglas Matthews, was the best man at our wedding. He signed our wedding certificate. So everybody gets this hushed attitude, and they get angry. And so my husband just politely takes me by the arm and says we're leaving, and we go home. And at which time he tells me I'm not to mention the subject of the assassination of President Kennedy again. And at the same time, I still had some mementos. I had little buttons, you know, the little campaign buttons,
Yeah.
and I had I don't know if it was a bumper sticker, but it was a little sign, maybe like somewhere in your yard, said vote for Kennedy, and just a bunch of little pictures and stuff, and the handout bills. And he burned them, burned every one of them in the fireplace.
Why did he? Were you threatened at all?
But he just told me I wouldn't see the sunrise again.
Did you feel that was a firm?
Well, at that time he had been filed on, let's see, for the murder of Johnny Gennaro. He had been filed on for the murder of Truman Carter. He had been filed on for the murder of George Fuqua and his girlfriend. He had been filed on for the murder of Jack Kelly. I had reason to believe that he was serious.
We're here with Detective Bobby Hargis, who was accompanying the president on his trip to Dallas and proceeded through the streets of Dallas on November 22nd, 1963. And Mr. Hargis, you were to the left and rear of the president?
Yes, left.
Accompanying him?
My assigned position was right at the side of the car, but I couldn't. There was too many people that couldn't make it.
Right. And then you, on your trip down there, you proceeded down Main Street and made a right on Houston, and
Then left on Elm.
then a left on Elm, and then approximately halfway down the street, or to your best recollection?
No, it was a little bit after we turned.
A little bit after the turn.
Because I was trying to catch up to my assigned position, and the first shot rang out.
And then, did you see any activity in the car at all, or any reaction to the president or Mrs.
Well, I
Kennedy?
saw Connolly turn around, because Connolly was sitting in front of the president, and I thought he had been shot. It sounded like a firecracker, but then when I saw Connolly's face, I thought he had been shot, which he had been, but the president had too. The same bullet that went through the president went through the seat and glanced off the governor's wrist and went to his thigh.
This all happened in such a quick period of time. It's hard to describe. Did you see any effects to the president's head? Was there any? Did you see any?
The second shot made his head like a ripe tomato. When you shoot it with a gun on the ground, it just explodes. That's how his head did. It exploded. And I got brain matter and blood and everything else on me.
At that point, after the shots, did you get off your cycle, or?
Yes, I parked my motorcycle, tried to, I ran up as I thought of it, this grassy knoll, and it stuck. So for some reason it stuck at this grassy bank up toward the railroad tracks, trying to find it. Because I saw people up there running.
retired detective, Mr. Jim Leavelle, formerly of the Dallas Police Department. And Mr. Leavelle, could you tell us what your duties were or where you were at on November 22nd, 1963?
I was working, I was a detective with the Homicide and Robbery Bureau, and my duties on that particular day was to cover anything that might come into the office. And so all the other officers had special assignments they was going to. We had 2 officers riding in the motorcade, but the rest of them was assigned to the trademark where the lunch was going to be held.
Do you remember at what point in time you first heard about that there was shots were fired, there was an assassination?
Well, I don't remember the exact time, but it'd be sometime around 12:30. I had gone out and arrested a suspect on an armed robbery and brought him into the office. And coming back to the office, I had been listening to the progress of the motorcade and on the car radio, and I pulled into the basement, turned it off, and got out. And about the time I was getting out in the basement, they were just reaching Houston Street, which would have made them turn back then 1 block to on the right to Elm Street. So the shooting occurred sometime between the time I got out of my car there and the time I reached my office on the 3rd floor. And then the lieutenant up there informed me that there had been shots fired and the president had been hit.
As I understand it, besides the arresting officers, once they had captured Oswald, you were the first investigative officer or one of the first to speak to him, is that correct?
I was one of them. I don't know, someone else may have talked to him. I can't swear to that. I went to the scene of the Tippit shooting, and they called me on the radio and told me they had the suspect in custody. And I just told them to meet me in my office, and I would talk to him there because I couldn't get to him over at the theater. So by the time I arrived back at my office, they had already gotten there and had placed him in a small interrogation room that we have. We have 2 of them in that office. And he was sitting in there by himself when I came in, and I asked where the man was and where the suspect was, and this lieutenant sat in there. So I went in and sat down and began talking to him. Now, whether anybody else had talked to him, I don't know. But I talked to him some 10, maybe 15 minutes before Captain Fritz and the other people come back in. And then they were getting ready to go in different directions to look for Oswald. Because he had called, he had Mr. Truly assemble all the school book employees, and Oswald was the only one missing. And Fritz, being the suspicious type that he is, he said, "I want that man in custody, I want to talk to him." So they proceeded back to the office, and with the information they'd gotten from the book depository, they were fixing to send people in different directions to look for him.
Did they have more than one address for him? There was a form that they had that showed him living at an Elsbeth address. Did they have records? In other words,
well, let me shorten that for you. I know what you're fixing to ask is about whether or not they had different addresses on it. I'm not sure that they had more than one because, like I said, I was in there talking to them, so I don't know what addresses they had. But I do know that they were preparing to send the officers in different directions to start looking for them, so I assume they might have had 2 addresses that they wanted to look for. But I do know that they probably had the one out in Irving, but I'm not even sure of that, to tell you the truth, because I wasn't out there talking to him. The door was shut, I was inside, closeted with Oswald, so I don't know.
At the time you were present when Oswald was being interrogated, was there any FBI agents present and Secret Service, or was it just strictly detectives and Dallas police?
There were Secret Service in there, and of course our officers, and it didn't make any difference whether or not during the course of the 2 days, it didn't make any difference whether or not the Secret Service or the FBI or postal inspectors or whoever was in there in the office talking to him. If Captain Fritz wasn't in there, he wanted one of us in there. In other words, one of the homicide officers in there. So there's one of our officers in there at all times. Sure, there's FBI was there, but after I lost my prisoners, I say, when they come in and took over the questioning, Cap told me, he said, go ahead and get as much information as you can on the Tippit shooting and make a tight case on him so that we won't have to turn him loose in case they have a little trouble making this presidential thing on. So that was the purpose. So I immediately set forth to make a tight case on him on the Tippit shooting.
So the basic questioning at first was just concerning suspicions about him shooting Tippit, and did you notice his reactions? Was he seemed nervous, or did he cooperate in any way, or can you elaborate on how he acted?
During the entire time that I was around him, from the time that I talked to him by myself, he was very polite and answered my questions. He didn't tell me the truth, but he wasn't belligerent about it, as some officers have reported, and I never saw him get belligerent at any time. Now, of course, I wasn't with him 100% of the time, so I can't swear to that. But I will say that during the entire time that I was around him, I never saw him get belligerent, or, of course, when we had to boo him down the hallway, he'd give that iron-fisted salute and so forth. But he was getting attention, and that's what he wanted. Now, with one exception, and I didn't see that he got too out of line on that, but that's when FBI agent James Hosty came in, and he was a little perturbed with Hosty going out and talking to his wife when he wasn't there. But outside of that one little episode, and I didn't hear what he said to Hosty, really, but I could see through if you've ever been in that office up there, the captain's office has a window that's about 4 or 5 feet wide, and I could see into the office, but I couldn't hear what was saying. But I noticed him talking and pointing his finger at Hosty. But what he was said, even then, I don't know. But I did set in on some of the questionings when the Secret Service talked to him, and the postal inspector talked to him, and someone else, 3 different ones talked to him. I was in the room when they talked to him. At all of those times, he never said anything, or he'd answer the questions. Just like when Holmes asked him about the ID he had on him, he said, "Did he ever use the name Heidel?" And he said no. And he said, "Well, do you know anybody named Heidel?" And he said no. And he says, "Isn't it true that when you was arrested, you had an identification card with your picture on it and A. Heidel on it?" And he said, "That's true." And Holmes asked him, said, "Well, how do you explain that?" He said, "I don't." Just like that. So he wasn't smart alecky about it, but he just didn't answer it. So that's, to me, that wasn't being belligerent. He just said, "I don't." Just left it.
Mr. Leavelle, just to step back just a few steps, hopefully. You said that Will Fritz, because Oswald was missing from the book depository, just as doing his job and being a conscientious officer, wanted to see this man.
He wanted to, yeah. Well, he had Mr. Truly call them all together, all the employees, and Oswald was the only one missing.
Yes, that's what I would like to. Was Oswald, really, I'm not sure of that. Was Oswald just the only man that was missing that day?
As far as I know.
Okay.
I talked to the officers that was down there with him at the time, and there was 3 or 4 of our officers in there with him. And I've never directly asked them was there anybody else missing, but
of course we know he was missing.
Yeah, he was missing, and Fritz said, "I want to talk to that man." But I would assume this: if there was another employee missing, it would have to be a woman, probably not a man. But anyway, I just never asked the officers that. But I did ask them what happened, and they said after he got them all together, and they announced that all of them was present, with the exception of Oswald. He said, "Well, I want that man in custody."
Do you know how they would have made that roll call if people had run out, that worked there and were out in the plaza. Do you know the length of time that would have taken place, Mr. Leavelle, that they would have made this roll call, or how they would have done it?
It was after the rifle and everything was found, but it was after that that they had he had them all assembled.
Which is probably a little bit after 1, or do you know about?
I don't have any idea. I couldn't even begin to tell you what time that was.
Well, we're obviously going to ask you about the 24th on Sunday. Okay, now, what first comes to mind with me is that we all understand in books, and we've been told that there was a delay in the transfer of Oswald. Might you be able to reflect on that for us? Just talk about it a bit.
All right. I think what you're driving at there is at 10 o'clock supposedly transfer time. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm asking you.
Well, all right. The news media got hung up on that 10 o'clock transfer time. And I heard the chief tell those people myself. And his exact words were, if you'll be here by 10 o'clock, you won't miss anything.
Oh.
And that didn't mean that we're going to transfer him at 10 o'clock. But if you're here by 10 o'clock, you won't miss anything. We'll be transferring him sometime around 10 or shortly thereafter. But as it turned out, that particular morning, Mr. Soros came up there. There was FBI agents in there wanted to talk to him. And Mr. Soros came up there. Well, maybe be correct. I don't know whether Mr. Soros was there or not. But I tell you, Mr. Kelly was there, and he was the head of the Secret Service out of Washington, D.C. He was there. And Mr. Holmes was on his way to church. And then he was listening to the progress on the radio, and he decided that he wanted to talk to him. And he made a detour, and instead of going to church, he came up there, and he turned. See, all of these people we didn't know was going to be wanting to talk to him on Sunday morning. So when we brought him down, or they brought him down, I didn't bring him down around 9 o'clock or so, and start that procedure. I had gone over with Captain Fritz and to the White Plaza Hotel and had coffee. And on the way back, we run into Chief Curry on the first floor. He was getting off the elevator, and there wasn't nobody on the first floor. And we stopped and talked to him about the transfer. And I suggested to the chief, I said, this elevator will stop here on this first floor. I said, why don't we take him out on this first floor, put him in a car on Main Street, and I said, we can have him in the county jail before anybody even knows we move him. I said, as far as I'm concerned, we don't owe the news media anything. And he said, Leavelle, I promised them that they could film the transfer, and he said, I'm going to keep my word, because I don't want them to think we beat him up or abused him or anything. So we went on I said, well, okay, so we went on upstairs, and Fritz motioned for me to go on in and sit down in there because there was one other officer, and then I believe it might have been Sims in the office. So I went in and sat down. And so I was sitting in there while Kelly, the FBI was just, some FBI agent, I remember it was just talking to him. And then Kelly talked to him, and then Holmes talked to him. And so when Holmes finished up his, I believe that's, I might have them reversed, but anyway, those two talked to him after I walked in and sat down.
You were on, of course, the rest is history, but you were on Oswald's right, and Mr. Graves was on his left, and you were handcuffed to Oswald, but was Mr. Graves?
No, Mr. Graves was not handcuffed to him. We didn't need two people handcuffed to him because if he got in any kind of an entanglement, such as did happen, then we needed one officer free to take action. Because if you're handcuffed, you're stymied in some respects, so you don't want that to happen. The only reason we handcuffed him to me was in case somebody was going to try to snatch him away from us for any reason. They'd have to take me with him too, because they couldn't tell him, he wouldn't get him by himself.
Did Jack Ruby yell anything when he shot
He
Oswald?
said something, but I didn't know what it was. And it's been said that he said you killed the president or my president or something. I don't remember. I don't have any idea. You'd have to talk with somebody else that understood it. I know he said something, but what, I have no idea.
Didn't you say something to Jack Ruby later to the effect of, I've known you and why you didn't do us any
Well, I
favors?
transferred Ruby the next day. And of course, we didn't notify the news media that we were going to transfer him. And so I told Ruby while I was holding him in the jail elevator waiting for the car to show up, I said, Jack, as long as the years I've known you, I've never known you to do anything to hurt anybody, hurt the police department. I said, but you didn't do us any favor when you shot him. And he said, Leavelle, all I wanted to do was be a hero. And he said, looks like I just fouled things up good. So, except he used another 4-letter word instead of that, but that's, and so I also asked him how he got into the basement. I said, how did you get in there when it was supposed to have been swept clean? And he said, well, I'd been down to the Western Union and I walked back up to he said, I didn't think I could get in, but I thought I could look down that ramp and see what was happening. And he said, just as I got there, a police car come out, driven by real Pierce. He knew Pierce because Pierce had worked Vice at one time. And he said, as the officer turned his back, talking about Vaughn walking out to the curb, he said, I walked right behind the car and right down the ramp. So, it very near has to be that way. I know Roy don't want to believe that, and I don't fault Roy in any way, but I fault ourselves or the security people there because we didn't think there'd be anybody over there on that side of the ramp, and there wasn't. There was 2 or 3 people I understand up they only stationed 1 officer there, and that was Roy Vaughn. They should have had 2. Now we had 4 or 5 or 6 on the other side because there was a great many people gathered on Commerce Street to see him come out because they knew he'd be coming out on that side. So in retrospect, we should have had 2 officers over there, but we didn't, and I don't fault Roy Vaughn on it 1 minute, and I know that he don't believe that's the way he got in, but I'm confident because you go back to the time element from the time we got the telegram off of him, it was date stamped at 11/17, and I talked to the clerk down there at length about it. He remembered it, and being Sunday morning and everything, you didn't have that much business going on. And 4 minutes later, the shot occurred in the basement. So I've walked that 3 different ways: fast, slow, and medium. And it took me roughly 83 seconds to do it, and that's almost a minute and a half. Then I talked to the clerk, and like it's a long story short, he said it would probably, from the time he date stamped that until Jack walked out, there's probably 15 or 20 seconds interval there. So if you add that on to the 83 seconds it took to get up there, that he couldn't have been in the basement more than a minute and a half or so before we came down. And I dare or challenge anybody to choreograph something that close. When I didn't know when I was going to be there, and neither did nobody else. So it almost has to be just like he says.
Chief Roy Vaughn of the Midlothian Police, who was a patrolman for the Dallas Police Department in 1963, and several other officers, and we understand that it was
an extraordinary time for ordinary people.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we were just cast in the middle of something.
Right.
Unbelievable. Nobody had no idea. The magnitude of it was unreal. But basically, we don't. I was stationed there, and some period of minutes, a few minutes, and there again, I just flat can't tell you what time it was.
And then, so basically, you didn't have any duties concerning that until later in the weekend?
Well, yeah, really nobody knew what the hell happened. Nobody knew what was going on. I detained in the 4 bombs and the 3 bombs in the railroad car. Yeah.
And you were involved with those?
Oh yeah, I was involved with those also. There was a man came to me where I was assigned there, and told me that he had a report. He had come out of the railroad yard over there, which was just west of that area. Had a report of some people jumping in a boxcar down on the straight ran, and I went to Harkness, the best I can recall, and he said, "We'll get some more men and go down there."
Right.
And so we did. I know there were several officers. One that really rings in my memory that was there was Marvin White, and
Marvin Wise.
Wise.
Yeah. Marvin Wise and I went down there, and I went to the south end. When we got to the boxcar, because we'd run a long ways. And when we got to the boxcar, there was a man that was standing beside the railroad tracks and pointed out the boxcar. Now, whether he was a railroad employee or not, I don't know.
Yeah.
And Marvin climbed up on the north end of the boxcar. I climbed up on the south. We looked over there. They were up on the north end. That's where they were. And we got them out of there. And I did not go with Marvin. And the picture that's showed is an officer named Billy Bass, who was Billy, and Marvin. I did not go with him back to the sheriff's office. I caught them. Several of us down there. There were several. I mean, probably half a dozen or more. And 2 or 3 of us got on the caboose of that train that they were on, and we rode back to a general area of where we were on that train, and got on with back to assignments. I didn't know all these years, probably 3 months ago, and the pictures show that Marvin and them taking them into the sheriff's office. I have always been under the impression, or had been under the impression, that those were released from there. Nobody knew who they were until all this come about in '02. That's the first time I did it. Marvin, and I knew Marvin well. You know, Marvin and I worked the same later years, worked the same year. We never talked about that. Yeah. I never knew until Marvin. Marvin told me that they'd carried him to the Dallas PD. I never knew that.
And it was normal for in the trains to have the transit.
Well, that was a big switch yard.
Yeah.
Big switching yard. Yeah, well, it was.
This is I realize it's so long ago, and this is probably so long. If you had to approximate, say, the apprehension of those guys, are we talking 4 days? I'm being facetious, of course. 4 hours? Half an hour after the shooting? Or within an hour?
It was after the shooting. I had the occasion that a security guard, brought a man down who he had called up in the Deltex building.
Yeah. Brehm.
What don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
well,
know who it was.
okay.
Okay. Brought him down and gave him to me. I talked to the man for a few minutes. He's very well distinct. I remember that. Just sticks in my mind well. Very dressed. Well, I mean, expensive clothes.
He didn't act.
Well, I looked at his ID. I can't remember who he was. So he brought him down. I remember looking at his billfold. I remember distinctly. It was one of those fold type billfolds. And the thing that caught my eye more than anything else, back in them days, you didn't have many credit cards, you know, especially police. You had just a lot of credit cards. Talked to him a few minutes. He told me he was there, and I carried him to the sheriff's office. And
You personally?
Yeah, I personally carried him to the sheriff's office. And released him to somebody inside, and whatever happened to him, I don't know. Yeah, I don't have any idea. So, but, you know, as far as you say Brehm, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that's what they.
Well, that's what this
That's
is.
what
Yeah. They have a picture, and
Yeah.
they said he changed his name to Charles Brading, or
Whatever.
I really don't know.
For the life of me. I
can't-
remember that he was a man from.
Now that was that before, now that happened, was that
would be-
before the
that was
three?
Before the three.
The three, right? That's before.
Best I can remember. So I would say, and it's just a estimate.
Yeah.
At the time, from the time I got there to the time it's all transposed, trying to get the one down, probably not.
Probably now. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I didn't say it was from the time I got there to the time that I all transposed. Boxcar, we're talking about an hour period from the
Yeah.
time, somewhere in there. The man that I took to the sheriff's office first was first. The deal after that, it all happened within approximately an hour.
Yeah.
He assigned me the Main Street ramp. I started up the Main Street ramp. Not usually many people in the basement. I met a man coming down the ramp. He told me, you know, don't let anybody in unless you identify them with the guard. And so as I was going up the ramp, I met this man coming down, and I stopped him. And he was a highway patrolman. At that time, they had a highway patrol office or a driver's license office over in the municipal area. I stopped him, and he showed me his ID and all, and he said he was going over to his office. I let him pass. I went on up there was other ones, you know, that had come in, and I tried to, complimentary trespasses, I'd turn them away. Then I noticed N.J. Daniels there, and,
Had he been fired from the
yeah,
police?
He's already canned at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know for what reason?
no, I do not know.
Was he?
And when I say, now, let me clarify that. When
Yeah.
I say he'd been fired, that was my information.
Okay.
I did not know that as a personal thing. I say that I only knew N.J. by sight, really.
Well, he wasn't like a friend.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No. I went to, and he was on a little pedestal deal there, flat. And he stayed there most all the time. I think basically up until the whole thing.
But not across the street on the same side as where the ramp is. He was at that point, is what you're saying.
Yeah, he was at the ramp.
Oh, he was at the ramp.
at
Okay.
He was Daniels, I'm talking about. Now, you talking about Fouché?
No, Daniels.
Yeah, he was. If you've been there and looked at it, you'll know that there is a.
There's a little curve there.
Well, there's a deal comes out. It's kind of a flat deal. This is a wall. I think it's on both sides. If I'm not mistaken. Again, been so long. So, heard some people holler, "Wash the car." And I see a car back up through the crowd. It backed up onto the exit over there and start out around where I was. Had the red lights on. No siren, had a red lights on. As a car approached me, I recognized real Sam Pierce, a man named Maxie, and his puppy was lady. I don't remember who was driving. Not knowing what they were doing. You know, I stepped aside up on the sidewalk. Because there wasn't no way they could get around me because it's very narrow.
Right, it's real small.
And so they left. I don't know where they went. I don't have any idea that they went. Supposedly, I understand that's when Jack Ruby said. Well, I stayed after. Shortly after that, we heard, "Here he comes." And
You actually heard them say that?
I believe that. "Here he comes." And then it was, it sounded something like, it didn't sound like gunshot, because it was muffled. There was a bunch of people in that basement. I don't, who tried to do security down there or whatever. I don't know. So here he comes, and hear what sounded like a gunshot. I see mass confusion. I see a hand coming out of the crowd, on the outside of the crowd. It's got a pistol in the hand, and they're fighting over it. I can tell that, but they're fighting over the gun. So, at that time, I don't know when the hell, I backed up in the corner. I see a man break away from the crowd and start running up the ramp. But he don't take 4 or 5 steps until he's tackled by a police reserve. The man turned out to be D.O. Burgess. Now, Burgess had been down there, he was plain clothes. He gets loose, I guess he identified it. He comes up to where I was, and I said, "What happened?" He said, "A reporter shot Mark." And that's what he said. Burgess is dead. He said it was for a telephone call from Captain Talbot, who was Hartman, who was my patrol captain. And he asked me, he said, "Do you know Jack Ruby?" I said, "Yes, I know Jack Ruby." He said, "Have you seen him today?" I said, "No, I've not."
You didn't see him at all?
No, I had not seen him. I didn't even know it was Ruby until sometime later in the day.
And also Rio Pierce and Mr. Fouché cooperated.
Yeah.
Right.
But they didn't either.
Right.
I don't think anybody said.
Right.
Don, for years, many years, I didn't know Don Fouché was across the street, or across the street in that squad car. And he knew Ruby because Don had been a long time how long I had. But I finally found out after the re-investigation and a conversation, he and I would have one more before I found that out. But in there, but I didn't know exactly what the allegations had been and everything else. Well, I was relieved sometime later in the morning. I don't remember exactly when. And I would do all 3 o'clock. I'll take a routine and I went on home. The next, to see that night, Pierce called me. And he said, "Need to get you to come in tomorrow." I was off today. He said, "Need to get you to come in." I was off next 2 days. Need to get you to come in and write a special report, which was standard, you know. And, he said, while you're down here, he said, I got you a part-time job, driving for a NBC news team. There wasn't anything said.
Nothing said.
No, nothing said. Tuesday, I was off Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. On Monday night, Real Sam called me home, and that's when he told me to come in. And I come in, wrote a special report, but never left City Hall that day. Never did anything for those drivers, and they paid me. But the next day, they would even want somebody again, so I worked for them again the next day. I suspected something, and then I heard later today that supposedly Ruby said that when the car come out and I moved aside, he went down and ran it. I didn't think so. In my own mind, I was positive that that wasn't right. So I called N.J. Daniels at home, and like I said, I just knew that. And I asked him, I said, N.J., did anybody go down that ramp when that car come out? And he said, absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what I heard.
And that reinforced what I believed.
And of course
So-
he was looking. I mean, you were waiting for this all to happen, right? I mean,
Yeah, and he, given more. I told Fisher, I said, I talked to N.J. Daniels, and he indicated and gave me the impression, but he didn't say directly, yes, I know you did, and yeah, this is basically what he told me. Then he told me, he said, not that we doubt your integrity, he said, but would you be willing to take a polygraph? And I said, well, yeah, I will, you know. So I went up there and took it. I knew that I knew nothing about it, totally, absolutely. So I took it, you know, and then I went to the Warren Commission.
sir, and your fellow officers in that vicinity, Ruby doesn't go down that ramp.
No, I've said my
And even till today, I mean, you really believe it. He
I'll
doesn't
go
go
to my grave saying that Jack Ruby did it.
You'll go to your grave
Yes,
saying
sir.
that.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Vaughn, most credible researchers, I'm not talking about the people that make us, most credible people know that's not true, that he didn't go down.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. When the investigators, re-investigation came down and talked to me numerous times, I told him, I said, I suspect how he got in that basement. Somewhere in my mind, and I look back, I seen a man walk down beside the building at the alleyway.
In the alleyway, yeah.
Okay. I carried him down, and I showed him that door and how to go up to that first floor, which you just come right in that back door.
That would have
They
been a
didn't even
secluded
know
way.
that. They had no idea that that door or that stairway existed. You know, and
You could enter that door without a key?
well, no, the one on the ground level at that, somebody that let him in could have very easily gone back there just panic lock, just push it open, let him in. I'll tell you this, to this day I'll say that whoever let Jack Ruby in, I do not believe let him in to further any
Right,
conspiracy.
sure,
I think it was a friendship.
Okay, right.
I really do.
That's,
And
Because he
they
was,
were looking for a scapegoat.
right.
Anybody could have been a scapegoat, would have been a scapegoat. And I happen to be number one on the list for a while. You know, I've always considered myself a big enough man to say, if I'd have known that happened, I'd have damn sure said yes. It's a possibility. It didn't. It didn't. I'll say that to my dying day, Jack Ruby never came down that ramp.
well, that's,
Over at the, where they're having the luncheon over in the market center.
Right, the trade
in
room.
Kennedy, with my wife, and first thing that got our attention, there was about 300 newsmen came running through the building there. It's kind of between here and Parkland House. It's somewhere out there where you're staying. It's Market Hall.
right, that's the exit before Empire, I think.
And
You were waiting
then,
for him.
then we were waiting, but he was supposed to be there at noon or a little after. He was in the parade from Love Field out here and some of the newsmen that I knew said that he'd been shot at. And the first thing was some people on Stemmons Freeway that had signs or some kind. They thought that's who shot him. People there did. But it later came out that he'd been shot at where he was, and that he was taken to Parkland, and then about 30 minutes, they announced somebody prayed and announced that he's dead. Then I was going on to Austin. I was what's not generally known probably, I was a great supporter of Kennedy. And that isn't popular in Dallas.
You were a great supporter of Kennedy.
I was chairman of when he had this rally here. I was chairman.
And that wasn't really popular at that point, huh?
Not exactly in Dallas. Now, I don't know whether it was, I guess, because, but they were having a rally during the election here. I'd supported Johnson, and they were both trying to get nominated, and he got it. And Mr. Rayburn and Uncle Joe Kennedy, I think, decided that Lyndon Johnson ought to be his running mate, and
the rest is history.
Right, the rest is history.
And
like Mr. Wade, when do you feel that, say, the evidence started actually coming into the Dallas officials and pointing the finger at Oswald at that? I mean,
well, they
from what you remember as best.
Well, what happened on that? Ordinarily, I wouldn't have been at the police department. See, I interviewed Oswald. It was a short time, but I was supposed to interview him after we got him down to the county. At 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon, because there wasn't any privacy up there. The cameramen were
all over.
400 people there, some from behind the Iron Curtain, and it was a madhouse, really.
Yeah.
But the only reason I went to the police department, I had some people up there. Bill Alexander was up there, and another assistant of mine. I was in touch with them. But I went down there because they put it on TV that they were going to file on him as part of an international conspiracy with Russia. And the White House, I wasn't talking to Johnson, I was talking to Cliff Carter, who was kind of his right-hand man. Dead now. He said that the president is very worried about that causing bad relations with Russia. But I said, you don't have to. In Texas, all you got to do is allege that Lee Harvey Oswald killed John F. Kennedy by shooting him with a gun. Because you have to prove everything that's in the indictment. And I said, we're not going to file on him as a part of an international conspiracy. But he called 3 times and wanted me to go down there to be sure they didn't. And I finally went down there, never got into the place, but went over the evidence with the homicide people and the FBI and Secret Service, I guess, were there. And first we went over the evidence on the killing of Officer Tippett, which we had, I think, 3 eyewitnesses to that identified. But then we went over the evidence against him, and at that time everything was the voice. Hadn't anybody written any formal review of what evidence they had, but we were talking to people, and they at that time had Day, I think, told you, he had a palm print on a gun that matched, although I don't think that was later confirmed by the FBI in Washington. They flew the gun to Washington that night.
Is it true that he had a palm print and then they had to turn over the gun to the FBI before he could, if it was before he could get the palm print, and then the FBI had the material for a week or so, and then the Dallas police got it back?
Well, I don't know all that to be for sure what happened on it. They just told me we had a palm print that's been identified off of him, but they found out sometime Saturday, I think, that it had been purchased in Chicago by mail order from Sears or Fields or somebody up there.
But, Mr. Wade, you had been aware, or you were told by someone yourself, obviously, that the Dallas police had a palm print, not a week later, but actually within that night, right? Yeah.
But they also...
And of course, then they flew that night, they flew the weapon to Washington.
Yeah, and they had an FBI agent take it to Washington,
Right.
Vince Drain.
Vince Drain.
Around down there.
Exactly.
And
he's still,
they headed back on Saturday night, though. But I don't know whether the print got rubbed off, or I never did see a FBI report whether they identified it or not.
No, according to the FBI, is that we cannot find this print that we understand is there. We can't find it.
It
But
probably was messed up and taken it off. It could very easy, you know, and lifted it.
Right. And that, of course, that's where all the hassle came in. That's where...
Now, what if,
But there wasn't any question, you know...
There was no question in your mind that you, the Dallas people, the Dallas, had a palm print.
Yeah, well, what I'm getting at, you didn't necessarily need a palm print. You had him buying the gun.
Right.
You had it out there, and you had his wife saying that he carried it with him that
Right.
morning. And they found it down here
Right.
and he was seen coming down the stairs.
right. So if it would have went to trial, it wouldn't have hurt the evidence as such because of the...
You had too much other evidence that he had possession of the gun. And that he bought it under the name of Eyewitnesses or something like that.
Had you, just your professional opinion, had it gone to trial, of course this is, hypothetical because he was killed. The evidence that you folks had on Oswald, the one piece that we were just talking about, the palm print, right? In your estimation, do you feel that that would have been something best left out of the evidence?
Oh, we'd probably put it in if I think Day was willing to testify
Yeah.
that he found the print on the thing. I think I even talked to him that night, I'm not sure.
Right. I mean, as far as Day go, as far as Mr. Day said, I lifted a print at 9:30, blah, 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 and, you know, he's absolutely confirms that.
Yeah, we'd used his testimony. See, the FBI would have, when you worry about that, you worry about whether somebody's going to contradict it, but the FBI couldn't contradict it. They could say they just didn't find it, you know.
Right, that's all they said, right.
Yeah.
They say we didn't find it.
And they couldn't say what Day had already done
Right,
to it.
right.
But, you know, what people forget is 5 people, you know, identified Oswald up there in the window from the ground. Not only a man there, but one man, and one of the 5 didn't identify him in the lineup, but came in the next day, or you had people identify, you had them, they followed, someone saw him coming down the steps and go into the, get a Coke or something. Yeah. And then he walked 4 blocks up Commerce Street and caught a bus. The bus driver and somebody on the bus identified him. Then he rode that 2 or 3 blocks and caught a cab. The cab driver identified him.
Did you get any conflicting report, Mr. Wade, or did you hear of any of a police officer that said, or signed an affidavit to Bill Decker's office that he saw Oswald get into another vehicle and travel a different direction? Did you ever hear that story, or?
Well, rumor only. Rumor had it that there was a station wagon supposed to pick him up,
Right.
but
That was Roger Craig.
none ever showed up, and they can trace him by the time that the bus was up there, and the cab knows what the time that he picked him up.
Right.
And they know they carried him over there.
Right.
And the landlady recognized it, and he got another gun,
Right. Changed
which he used to kill, which is the gun that killed Tippett. And he had that gun on him. That was traced back to him. I'm not sure how.
I've heard people say, now see again, I don't know because, you know, I wouldn't know who to talk to verify it, but it's been written or said that the rifle that he used was never tested to see if it had recently been fired. Now is that anything major as far as at a trial, or in other words, what I'm saying is
it would have, but I'm under the impression that it had people found it, smelled of the barrel, and could smell smoke.
Smell smoke. Okay. I frankly.
And people saw on the ground, saw the little fire coming out of the gun. You know, the little fire comes out with the bullet.
I think some reporters saw some of the barrel, and 2 or 3 witnesses on the ground saw some of the barrel.
Yeah, they saw a gun. They could, of course, identify the gun up there, but the gun was found laying right there.
Right.
And they identified a bullet found on, I believe it was on the gurney where Conley was, that then came out of that gun.
Unfortunately they have discrepancies on that because the guy who found it, his name was Daryl Tomlinson, said that he found it on a stretcher that wasn't. I mean, he could have been mistaken, but you see what I'm saying. They've thrown more coal.
Well, I talked with the girl, Peggy Vaughn, who was constable over in Oak Cliff, was there, and his wife was the head nurse. I talked with her myself that Friday night, because I went out there to see Conley and his wife. Really his wife. I went to school with both of them. And she said she found it on the gurney that Scott was on, and she had the bullet in her hand and showed it to me. But see, this is right after the shooting, and I said, you ought to give that to homicide.
Yeah.
But be sure you trace the chain of command.
It was a nurse, you're saying a nurse?
The head nurse there.
The head nurse found this?
And her name was?
What was her name?
Vaughn, I think, her husband.
Okay.
I don't know the name.
Yeah, all I can think of is Audrey Bell, but that's not.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, all I know, she showed me a bullet and said, I took this off. I said, where'd you get it? She said, I took it off of the gurney that Conley was on.
Wow.
That don't mean necessarily that bullet is the one that went through Conley.
Yeah.
But, you know, they were putting them on gurneys out there.
She actually showed it to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
was that? Was that?
It was 4 o'clock or
on Friday?
Friday night.
Friday night at 4?
Yeah. And I told her to give that to homicide where they could trace the where she found it.
You said they were putting them on gurneys. You meant in reference to?
Well, I mean, you bring a bunch
body. Yeah.
The people are put on gurneys at the scene, but you may be moving them to another to go in the operating room or something.
Yeah. And as far as you know, she did hand it over to somebody?
I don't.
You don't know?
I just told her to. She said she would.
Yeah.
But she showed me a bullet there, and I said, well, you don't have business of that. Homicide ought to have it.
When we remember seeing you on TV, was that Friday evening later, or was it Saturday evening?
I was on probably 8 or 9 o'clock Friday night, and my problem was I talked to different officers but had nothing in writing.
Right.
to look at. And an amusing thing happened in that interview. Of course, that's where I said it's an Italian or German gun. I didn't even know what
Yeah.
make it was, or I hadn't seen it or anything.
So that's where they printed the Mauser.
Well, wasn't given an interview. I was down to see. The only thing, basically all that Oswald would say to me or anybody else for that matter was, I want my lawyer, named the guy in New York City.
Abbott or...
I can't remember.
Apt, yeah, that's Apt.
Apt, yeah. And I called him, or had him called, and he said, I'm not representing him. And then
So
the
you
second thing he'd say, well, police brutality. Look here to this scratch cut on my forehead. Well, that had happened when they arrested him in the theater. It was a fresh wound. And the chief of police and some of the powers that be up there said, well, press wants to know about this police brutality. They say you're beating him up and this and that. And I said, won't you go down and put him in a lineup and let the newspaper reporters look at him, show that he's not being mistreated. And I was down there, but some of the reporters recognized me and started following me out and asking me questions, and kind of, it wasn't a regular interview, it was me trying to get out and talking a little also. But this funny thing happened, I don't know whether you're familiar with, there was Oswald had a whole bunch of pro-Castro literature, both over here and out at Irving, where his wife lived. The Oak Cliff's over this way. And that's where he was living, or had a room. And I couldn't think of the name of the organization. I'd seen some of the literature, and some newsman out in the audience yelled pro-Castro something, coalition or something.
Right, well, corrected what you had said, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I had hesitated because I didn't remember the name of it. He said the name of it was this. And
do you know who that person was who corrected?
Very well. Jack Ruby.
Yeah. Well, when you're referring to when.
But I didn't know him.
Yeah.
Right.
I never had met Jack Ruby.
Right. But I meant when you said free.
Then when we started walking out, I was getting a little further, and he came running up there and said, I'm Jack Ruby, to me.
Yeah.
And I said, what are you doing in here? They're supposed to just have the press. And he said, I represent the Jewish press.
Is that what he said?
Yeah.
That's what another officer told me.
Yeah.
And then he wasn't satisfied with that. I was still kind of in a mob scene trying to get out of the building.
Did you know him? I mean, did you know him at all before that?
I had no idea. He told me who he was. Now, when he said Jack Ruby, I knew the name of it.
All right. Okay.
I'd heard Jack Ruby's name, and I knew he ran a girly show.
Yeah, right, a girly show. This is something that was handled by the world press. It was all over the world, for days and days, and until after the Warren Commission closed. It kind of went away a little bit for quite a while. But you do recall, obviously, yourself saying that that we feel that we have enough evidence here that we have our man, or something in that nature. I'm not sure the exact words.
You have to have what's called a prima facie case before we would take a charge on it.
Right, right. Now, what I'm saying is that you did, or not just you, but Dallas and yourself, and you made the statement that you did take a charge that Oswald was guilty. We felt we have the guy, we have enough to show without a doubt or a reasonable doubt that he is the man. Okay. I just would
I think we had it then, and I think we have it now.
Yeah, okay, all right. But
although there have been a bunch of people die.
But being a lawyer or a professional person in law yourself, I don't know this, and I'm just asking as a layman, because I know nothing about this. Had Oswald lived, now of course this is hypothetical, but had Oswald had to go to trial, right? Would that statement, would that have hurt his chances, say, of him getting a
Fair jury.
unbiased jury? I mean, I'm just asking. Could you answer that?
I don't think it would necessarily. The court, reversed that down there because we didn't change the venue, the Ruby trial.
Uh-huh.
But
I'm pertaining about Oswald.
I know, but the same thing had happened there. They'd probably asked for a change of venue, but probably no.
But what is a venue? I don't even know what that is.
Jurisdiction.
Where you play it, where you try the case.
Oh.
If you try it in
okay.
Houston or.
So you're saying they might have asked for a change of location?
Change of location. But that statement is said in practically all the cases. If we accept a charge, we say we have enough evidence.
Okay, all right.
We think to convict him.
Obviously, or you wouldn't do that.
That's right.
Right,
We wouldn't
okay.
take it.
All right.
Could they have made a big deal, Mr. Wade, about, now I talked to Detective Jim Leavelle trying to help me out on this, but anyway, could they have made a big deal about it that while Oswald was interrogated, the total number of hours, that they didn't record it, or, I mean, we're talking 1963, I don't know the
Can you say something about that? I mean, allegedly...
No, they, you have to know Captain Fritz to know that he never took any notes or whatever.
But can you get away with that?
For anyone? Is that what you're saying? That's the way he. That's the way he
did.
He
operated. He was a hip pocket. He was probably the best homicide man to find out who done it. And the poorest in paperwork that you give to the DA's office. I've had cases where we were in the middle of a trial and say we're getting hurt here. Don't we have any evidence, say eyewitness evidence?
Right.
And he said, by the way, I do have, and he'd reach in his billfold and said, let's call this girl.
All right. So,
see, he was even holding evidence withholding from the district attorney.
So you're just saying that this was his mannerism. This is the way he.
Modus operandi, and I don't think at that time they allowed interviewing them under recording. I mean, they had to get his permission, and I don't think he would have given it permission to anything.
Question we're asking you about, again, bottom line is, we have a man being interrogated for approximately 12 hours, and we have no, say, documentation on what he said. That was a very big question to a lot of people concerned then. You obviously can see why yourself. These people.
Well, I can see why. I know Fritz and know his way he operated, but for one thing, he never told them anything.
Yeah.
I mean, if it had, they'd probably had it on the front page of the paper.
He never admitted to anything. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he never said anything incriminating.
I see.
And he even, when they called him down there, took him downstairs that Friday night, he said, "Look here, police," in front of the press, police brutality.
Right.
And
an officer hit me.
And
he forgot to say.
I want my lawyer now. You come close to another serious question about him not having a lawyer.
I was going to ask you, what if, again, if he lived, right? When would this guy have gotten legal representation? Was there anything in the works?
Let me tell you what. Well, of course, he'd eventually been appointed a lawyer by somebody, but
is there a time frame that the city,
the rules now are stricter than they were at that time,
okay.
but, and the only thing that means is anything he might have said would not be admissible if
I see.
because he hadn't been notified. See, we didn't have the Miranda case
Right.
then.
He
That's
didn't.
exactly
You're
what-
saying.
That's exactly what
Yeah.
JFK told me.
Right. So you're saying that he didn't say anything, but if he had, and not having legal,
It wouldn't
legal,
be exactly.
it wouldn't have been admissible in court anyway,
Not likely.
right? I see.
It was originally on Main Street where it comes down.
Mhm.
And as soon as he turned and went toward the school book depository, I picked
You
Joe up and
walked
run
over?
across the
You ran
grass
across?
there.
I didn't-
Because this was an opportunity.
But no one stopped you.
Well, there was,
There was people all over the
Well,
place.
well, the point I'm getting is someone's made a claim that they got to stand close to where he was because they knew the police. The police were running people out, but that's
yeah,
not
but I
true.
don't think-
oh,
Police
there was nobody over
There
there.
was somebody there.
When they come down, they had to make a distinct right turn to go over to the school book depository. Now, at that
So when
time,
you viewed him coming down Main, you just zipped
That's
right
it.
across the green there.
shaking hands with the President of the United States is you can't, I don't care what your politics are, if you recognize the power of the office and say a few words to him and he says a few words to you, it's astounding. It has a profound effect on you. Now, prior to that, the only thing I had ever come close was one time we never took the kids over to Wynwood Shopping Center. I had tunnel vision. I couldn't see anything else except him.
Uh-huh.
People who asked me later, they says, was Jackie pretty? I says, I don't
You didn't
know.
even look at her, right?
I never looked at her. And when they told me Connolly was wounded, I says, when? How?
You didn't see Connolly wounded,
They says he was in the car
You
with
just saw.
I says, hey, all I could see was the President of the United States. I don't expect that I'm going to waste one fraction of a second looking at somebody else. Well, then how did he get hit? And so that was that night. And
But you told him the first shot was like a firecracker.
well, I told him that I hoped it was a firecracker. I didn't know what it was right to begin with. But then when there's two more similar reports and so forth, and then I could see what was happening. I could see the front of his throat, and then the second one that took a part of his head off. And,
You could see that there was actually a wound at the throat.
well, I could see,
Yeah.
because he went like that, and he called attention to it
Yeah.
inadvertently.
Yeah.
Then we started the think process, and by 8 o'clock that night, I told him that I thought that the first bullet must have gone through him then and hit Connolly, because there's no other sequence that there could have been. And
But
now,
you did say that you saw the effects of the headshot, and also that you told your friend Mark Lane that a piece of...
I said I thought a piece of it, but anyhow, yeah. Well, anyhow, I've never changed my mind. I'm sure that that's what happened, and to go on for, I don't know whether it was a year or what it was before the Warren Commission published their findings on the thing, or their assumed findings, the way people say right now, or their fiction they created.
Were you still over on that side of the street when people started running across the street?
I never left that side of the street.
You never did.
I never left that
Never
side.
crossed at all.
Never crossed. There were people running around nuts, didn't know what the hell they were doing.
Yeah.
And some cop got off a motorcycle and run up the steps, and people started following him because they figured they knew what he was doing. And but it was sheep.
This is the boy that was with Jack. I mean, with Chuck that day. That's Joe.
That's Joe, right?
Yeah.
Joe was what, 4 or 5?
5.
5.
Although I hate to say this, but some of the people who are in that picture were running around had no idea what the hell happened. This is what I told you with General Patton.
Yeah.
Why they yanked me in that interview that you see all the time taken there, and the one that's in Mermaids with Cher, that interview was the first time probably I had ever heard such a thing. But I think there's some shots or something. I think the president got shot. You know, our genius there wandering around, didn't know what in the hell was going on.
Miss Hill?
Yeah, and stumbling and come down. What happened? What happened? What happened? And I said that the president was shot. And
in your mind, you knew he was shot. Right?
And they all started hollering, what the? And finally, this one guy. Every once in a while, you get somebody that takes command of a thing. And there were a lot of reporters there hollering like they do at a press conference. You know, he says, "Were you ever in the service?" I says, "Yes, I was in the infantry. I was a ranger, and I've been wounded." And I pulled my sleeve up and showed him. And he says, "Will everybody end this confusion? Let me ask the questions and see if we can't get some sense out of this." So he started asking the questions. Now here comes Dallas' finest down there, and I'm in among all these people, and they thought that I did it for a fleeting moment. So the two cops took me and Joe and took us up to the school book depository at the front door and put us in a car there. Now, when the cops take us up and put us in the car, and then people started calling us names and beating on the car.
With your son?
Yeah.
I imagine that.
Now, people are running
Well, I always bring mine
in and out of the school book depository.
It's just unbelievable.
Nobody wore white hats, so you didn't know the cops from the robbers. I saw more guns that day than I had in weapons issue in the Army when we were going in for the... Everybody had a gun. I was one of the few that didn't have a gun there. My thoughts whenever I started hearing some of these controversies on whether there was plot, this or that, I thought, my God, here for a year I have gone on telling my story of what I thought happened and all this and that. And now they come out, am I going to be made a fool of? Are they going to come out and find something different? I didn't see how they could. I really didn't see how the Warren Commission could find anything but what I had said went on down there.
But they didn't call you.
They went, huh?
You didn't call you before the Warren Commission.
Well, all they did was take the deposition. They came, Joe, what was his name?
Terry.
Hanley, Joe Hanley.
He was an FBI agent.
They were there whenever Ruby was Oswald was killed.
Yeah.
They were at our house on the FBI on Sunday.
But you weren't mentioned in the report, though, or were you?
I was, yeah, that's in the Warren Commission.
Yeah.
There's a deposition taken in there. No, I was never called to testify.
Yeah. You never went to Washington?
No.
Oh, okay.
But I told them the same thing, and I thought, Christ, when that comes out, when it came out, I was perfectly satisfied. I thought it was all over. I didn't know that was not the end. That was the beginning.
Well, basically, it was for about approximately 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is they realized that they had 9 wounds between the 2 men, and they had the windshield of the limousine, the glass cracked, and they had a dent above the rearview mirror. And they were saying that two shots did all that. And people were, saying how hard that would be to do with 4 wounds in Kennedy and 5 in Conley because of James Tay, And that's what started the whole thing is, how could someone cause that many wounds in 2 men with only 2 bullets to do it? And that's the whole thing. If it wasn't for James Tay, then they were in pretty good shape as far as believability for everybody because film, which the public didn't see this proved until the late 70s or whatever, mid-70s. They saw this guy's head go back, and then they look at the 9 wounds and 2 bullets to do it, and I mean, like I said, I'm only interested in the facts and the truth, regardless, But it is hard. It's kind of hard to swallow that somebody could cause that many wounds with 2 bullets. But the thing of it is you were there, and the other people weren't, and you had the experience. It's been received threats for the last 28 years. Were you ever, anybody ever call you up and threaten you?
I don't ever remember.
I don't know why anybody would threaten me.
He's had a lot of people call him like you and ask him about it and
Right.
talk to him about it or come home here and.
I had a lot of people tell me I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And one person called up Terry one time and got her, and this was a couple of years after we were still over on Kings Highway, not Kings Highway, over on Clinton, and cussed her out and said that me changing my testimony, which I don't ever recall doing, but I was told that I'm acting too much. I didn't have enough Jewish instinct in me to realize there was some money to be made here if I just wasn't so damn hard-nosed about it. And,
Yeah, look at the Queen.
And
She's doing real well.
And
Would you say that the second and third shot was, in your opinion, too close together for one person to do?
I definitely, always, my doubt was always because they were so close together. And at the time I heard it, it didn't seem to me like they were more than 2 or 3 seconds apart. It was just so simultaneously that it was unreal. Implicated got by is when I run across the street to go up the knoll, and that's when I was stopped by this guy that I know he had a gun under his trench coat. I could see the muzzle. I might have been running right straight into it.
House across the street and went to not to the fence area, a little bit in front of you to the left, but you went more
toward the end of the school book depository.
Right.
And that's where this guy stopped me.
How far did you get?
I got right up to the top, near the top of the knoll.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's when he said, you better not come over here, you better not go any further because you can get shot or killed. And I don't remember too excited at that time whether he said shot or kill.
But he had on
he had on a suit. He was dressed as a detective or an FBI person.
Do you remember by any chance if he had dark hair or light colored hair, or
well,
or was he tall? Or?
He had on a hat.
Yeah.
How many of them would have seen the gun? That all I saw was just the muzzle of it. Because it was completely
under his
covered
coat?
up. Under his coat.
Under his suit coat?
Yeah. Well, not under his trench coat he had over his arm.
Trench coat.
And
then you went around the back of the building. Yes, sir. Was anyone around in the back when you got there? Yeah, there were several Secret Service agents. That's where Secret Service agents, that could be an arrow. I didn't get them identified. They told me they were Secret Service. I put some people in. This is not correct. I don't believe.
Which part?
I just don't believe that this fella, he acted like he was teed off.
Yeah. He acted that way a lot. So.
Yeah.
A lot of people are not.
He was very pushy, pushed people around a lot. So.
No. Well, for instance, the best I remember when I went in to give this, he had a revolver laying on it. You see this? There's a 38 revolver. This fella here, I just don't know about it.
Wow. Yeah.
You can tell by the frame of question. See, no, he irritated a lot of people.
Well, that's true. What you said is true. The people that I know that have to deal with him say the same thing.
Tell him, Mr. Harkness, that the part where he said they told me that they were Secret Service agents. Is that true? Or?
I don't recall that. I'll tell you, it was just like I was telling you, it was an assumption on my part, and I could have been wrong.
Right.
So on this.
But you see how something like that in print, and that's printed in the Warren Commission. That he's saying that, or they said that you said that they told you so. And you don't tell us that.
I don't remember telling it to you. They were with the presidential party. I don't recall telling him that. I assumed they were Secret Service. But this, I don't know on this part here. I wouldn't want to verify that on there. If he said it, and he's probably got tapes on it. And but he doesn't get you in a good frame of mind about the question.
Yeah.
They say the Secret Service is supposed to stay close to the president, you know, close to the president. But some from that party fanned out. It was in the party. I don't know whether they were FBI agents on there, but some of them were in that group. In the group, like I say, it was a highway patrolman driving.
Right.
It could have been state or local.
You, with your own eyes, saw some of these people fan out?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wanted to mention. I hope so. Because,
as it turned out, it wasn't one that took place.
Yeah.
It's one they should have, probably.
Yeah, but I don't know this deal. I think I had about a 26-page deposition.
Yeah. It was pretty long.
Yeah, you know, and all of it was on stuff that I didn't think was very pertinent on there. Of course, I wasn't an investigator. I didn't know.